It's a controversial topic. My partner told me she wouldn't like a prenuptial agreement as she sees it as a trust concern, but if I really wanted it, it's fine. I say I trust her since I even leave all my cash unattended in the house. However, the laws around marriage are flawed and can make people resentful towards each other after a divorce, even if the divorce ended on good terms. Divorce or no prenuptial agreement laws can complicate things between two people, even if they ended things amicably. I asked Reddit a few years ago on a different account and had to delete it because of how much hate I was getting. Like, what is this 50 to 50% after we divorce? We are strangers if we ever end up divorcing. You are no longer my wife. You are simply my kid's mother. That's all there is to it. Laws should focus more on balancing the child's life for the best, I feel. But then again, I'm not that smart, so I don't know. Story 1. At 22, a prenuptial agreement would not have occurred to me. I owned very little. At 50, if someone ever actually convinced me to get married again, we would absolutely have a prenuptial agreement to protect us both. Story 2. It has nothing to do with trust. It is about what belongs to you. I would be cautious of someone telling me I could not have one. Besides, they only protect premarital assets, which means the longer you are married, the more quickly they become intertwined. Story 3. There are two things to consider. 1. Absolutely get a prenuptial agreement if you have existing assets you want to protect. Consider how you will structure your marital finances. Do you want all money during the marriage to be joint or independent? If the answer is independent, what is the purpose of this marriage? Marriage is not about romance. You can be romantically partnered with someone forever without marriage. Marriage is a legal relationship with the state. It makes you eligible for joint tax filing, generally allows for shared insurance coverage through your jobs, and provides other legal protections. You can use a prenuptial agreement to opt out of most financial legal combinations, but then why marry at all? If it is to raise children in a stable family unit, that is a good reason. For any other reason, stay unmarried but committed. Story 4. I married without a prenuptial agreement. After a while, things went downhill in our marriage, so I was able to convince my wife to sign one. I was never going to leave her but needed some insurance for myself. This prenuptial agreement would have no effect whatsoever during our marriage. A little over a year later, she decided to cheat on me, so that prenuptial agreement suddenly became the best investment of my life. Every marriage should start with planning your divorce. Money doesn't have any friends. Story 5. Prenuptial agreements are mostly useful only if you have significantly different levels of assets before you get together. Do not expect them to enforce any particular division of assets acquired during the marriage. As I have generally dated people with a roughly similar income and asset level to me, I do not think they are very useful for me. Story 6. When you marry, you are signing a prenuptial agreement. Allow me to explain. You can either have your own prenuptial agreement drawn up or agree to the state's agreement when you marry. Prenuptial agreements are smart. If you sign a contract, it should be one that you both agree with, not a blanket one provided by the state. This is just my opinion. Story 7. Many people have negative views on prenuptial agreements. It helps to look at a prenuptial agreement like an insurance policy. We do not get married thinking that we will get divorced, just as we do not buy car insurance expecting an accident. However, if something were to happen, we have a plan in place. Either the government will decide the consequences in a divorce, or you and your partner can make that decision yourselves during a time when you are both happiest and in agreement. Story 8. Marriage is a legal contract that most people sign without understanding it. That should be a warning right away, but we usually ignore it because it is some magical thing we are just supposed to do without thinking about it. You are essentially signing away your rights to half the property you own for the rest of your life without questioning it. And that is a significant matter that should be considered. Also to be considered is that more than 75% of marriages are ended by the woman, and it is 90% if the woman has a college degree. Those are particularly concerning odds for men. If you cannot, in good times, sit down and have a rational conversation about what you are both entitled to if the relationship fails, and that conversation is fair to both of you, then are you really prepared for a life together? Seriously, just sitting down and saying, What would be fair to each other if something goes wrong in the future? If you cannot manage that, or if she does not want to because of trust issues, then you should have trust issues here. Story 9. I think they are a prudent and smart option, although I am aware that sometimes they get disregarded. Personally, I think if women are going to say that any man could be a predator, abuser, or creep, it is only fair for people to acknowledge that any woman could cheat. Then divorce me and take half my belongings, or any woman could be lying about the father of my child. Why is it that women are allowed to be vocally careful and doubtful of men's intentions, with valid concerns, but men cannot do the same, also for valid concerns? It seems the world refuses to acknowledge that there are ways women can harm innocent men. Story 10. Marriage is a legal contract your spouse can break at any time, for any reason, and be financially rewarded for it. There is no good reason for a man with something to lose to get married. You get all the benefits of marriage in a long-term monogamous relationship without the huge, life-altering risks. If you are naive enough to gamble your future on how someone feels on any particular day, at least try to limit the devastation as much as possible with legal protection. Story 11. I do not really have a positive opinion on marriage in general, but if you are going to do it, you might as well be smart about it. Prenuptial agreements usually protect both parties anyway. Story 12. I take Kevin Costner as an example. He has some money. He had a prenuptial agreement, probably written by high-priced lawyers, but it has done little. Prenuptial agreements are exactly that, before marriage. So assets gained during marriage are shared. The same can be said for trusts. It is just as easy for her to sign because it is just a paper. If she truly believes the union will last, then it is a moot point. Men see daily examples of a system skewed against them in divorce. Protecting assets you worked for should not even be a debate. Society has changed from 50 years ago, and so should this aspect. It is one reason why many of us will not get married. Story 13. Tell your partner if she thinks that couples who are now divorced thought that they were going to be together forever. For those that involve cheating, did they also fully trust each other? I am sure she would admit that they had no trust concerns, yet the divorce still happened. Just like buying car insurance does not mean you plan on getting into an accident. A prenuptial agreement is good insurance. Story 14. I had a girlfriend, and 14 months ago she wanted to move in with me. No marriage, just live together. I insisted on a cohabitation agreement, which is a prenuptial agreement for people not married. Things were great, but about 8 months in, she started saying it was bothering her. She said it was a trust issue. She dragged me to couples therapy, trying to get the therapist to push me to tear up the cohabitation agreement. One night, she asked bluntly if it was my line in the sand, and I said yes. She moved out about a month later. It was amicable, no shouting. We still text and talk occasionally. That agreement saved me. Story 15. If you do not agree on something as fundamental as this, then you are not good long-term partners together. It is that simple. Story 16. Marriage is a legal contract and comes with its own laws. It is like taking a job and having the option to negotiate your salary and benefits but choosing not to. Story 17. I would prefer a prenuptial agreement because I have invested money in certain markets over the past 15 years. I do not want anyone to claim rights to these investments just because a marriage ends. However, I also know that most prenuptial agreements are ineffective. A spouse might willingly sign one, then later, during divorce proceedings, claim full rights to my investments by falsely stating they signed under duress. For these reasons, it is often better to remain single. Story 18. A prenuptial agreement has its place. If both partners are in a similar place in their life journey, then a prenuptial agreement seems unnecessary and even distrustful. If one partner has worked hard and amassed a fortune, it would be unfair for the other, far less successful partner to come in and take half by default. Story 19. Absolutely getting a prenuptial agreement. I would never consider marrying someone without having a prenuptial agreement in place. My money was mine before I met them, and it will be my money if we ever decide to split up for whatever reason. Story 20. Yes. Keep in mind, a prenuptial agreement is not just for financial matters. It can specify the process to follow in case of divorce. helping to avoid a messy and lengthy divorce procedure. Story 21. If I cannot have a prenuptial agreement, I am simply not getting married. I want anything I own and have worked hard for to be protected. I was homeless for 4 years during my childhood and 2 years in my adult life, and I am not going back to it. Story 22. I think it should be mandatory. We have laws in place to protect people from themselves already, so why not this? Worst case scenario, it saves you pain, suffering, and stress. Best case, it does nothing. Either way is fine. Story 23. Marriage is considered from her perspective due to trust concerns. How many women raise concerns about being left with nothing when their partner leaves them for someone younger? Should they not be married? There is no financial penalty for ending the relationship. If she has a problem with a prenuptial agreement where you keep your pre-marriage assets, she is a gold digger. Story 24. I regard that as a necessity. The way marriage currently works legally and socially, not having a prenuptial agreement is simply recklessly inviting problems. Marriage is between two people, so a prenuptial agreement is not just planning divorce. In my opinion, it is also about confirming that we are on the same page regarding the rules we plan to conduct our life together by. The divorce part is only there to ensure a smooth process if all prior cooperation and communication attempts fail. Also, nothing says that this agreement cannot be changed later. I think prenuptial agreements get unnecessarily demonized. At least I understand why the wedding and divorce industries finance things to push that narrative. They earn from people marrying, splitting, and remarrying. But as individuals, I think you can only benefit from asking the tough questions in the beginning and finding answers together. If you cannot do that, then what chance does that marriage have? Story 25. You pay for medical insurance, hoping you never have to use it. You pick out a plan with details just in case, but hope you never have to implement them. A prenuptial agreement is the same thing. Here is how I explained it to the woman I almost married, as my assets and income are on the higher end, so I would not entertain marriage without it. Anyway, here goes. We love one another right now. In this very moment, we want what is best for the other person. However, life may not go our way, and someday between friends, family, and attorneys, we can lose sight of that and turn to selfish desire. If I bump my head and my personality changes and suddenly I am the meanest person alive, I would expect you to leave. I want to protect you, and I know you want the same for me. We are about to make the greatest decision we will ever make in our lives, and we need to have the hard talks if this is going to work. Ignoring possibilities does not remove them. We need to plan for the worst case so we, the ones in the marriage who love and know each other, can decide how that looks. If not, the state decides what happens and they do not care about either of us. Story 26. Trust concerns. Personally, I know many people who have divorced. Some of my best friends are divorced, and I have also worked with men who went through this difficult situation. 99% of these cases involve trusting completely, meaning no prenuptial agreement, and what did the woman do? She took half of what belonged to him. Story 27. Look at it this way. Would you start a business without some type of business contract? Marriage, when you break it down, is nothing more than two people coming together to form a new business. A prenuptial agreement predetermines how assets will be divided if the business fails. It is the same reason you have life insurance. It is there for the worst-case scenario. In the best case, you would not need it for 50 years. The prenuptial agreement is there for the what-ifs. Story 28. I did not sign a prenuptial agreement. I was quite poor and young when I married my wife. If anything ever happens to her, I likely will not get married again. However, if I do, I would definitely get a prenuptial agreement. Story 29. I say I trust her since I even leave all my cash unattended in the house. Bro, trusting someone not to steal from you is not the same as trusting someone to be your life partner. Regarding the part about how divorce laws can ruin things between two people even if they ended on good terms. If the two ended on good terms, no one cares how you divide the assets. In other words, you know how these things get messy and get into court? Someone complains. If you both agree on 50/50ths, fine. 70/30ths, fine. 90/10ths, fine. Unless someone runs to court, nothing happens. It's not like the law is self-executing or something. So this really just sounds like ignorance or an excuse. All that said, prenuptial agreements are personal choices. Discuss it with your partner. Generally, prenuptial agreements are more typical if people have significantly different assets at the beginning of the relationship, so these couples tend to be 30 plus. Not a lot of 25-year-olds who have to jealously guard their anemic retirement accounts. The exception is, of course, those who have family money. There are dependents to protect from a previous relationship, or one person has been divorced before. By far, the biggest indicator of whether someone wants a prenuptial agreement is wealth. Wealthy people protect their money better. It's one reason why they are wealthy. Some people feel that prenuptial agreements are just smart. Others think the ask seems like planning for failure, a slap in the face. It's a personal decision, but it is good that you are talking it out with them. Just make sure you can explain your stance clearly and that you are listening to understand theirs. There are valid points on both sides, and being dismissive is the best way to show someone you are not marriage material. Story 30. It should be part of every marriage going forward. If the law required it, we would be better off. Then you know both people are in it for each other and not for anything else. You never want to get divorced. We all start with grand hopes of doing things right. After many years, when someone is hurt, it happens. If either person cannot let go, then the marriage gets taken down with it. Story 31. The prenuptial agreement is not just to protect you. It is to protect both of you. Ask her if you started a business with someone, would she want you to have an exit plan that secures both of your futures and provides protection against unexpected, unpredictable behavior? We know that people intend to be good when they start a business, enter any agreement, or get married. However, life takes a variety of courses that no one can predict. Story 32. A prenuptial agreement does not mean you do not trust her. A prenuptial agreement means you do not trust the infinite variability of the person she might become several years down the road. Story 33. Most women will say they don't see a point because they typically have the most to gain if a marriage ends. A prenuptial agreement is implemented by default by the state when you get married if you do not have one on file. So the notion of not believing in prenuptial agreements is inherently misguided since there is one in place by default. Having an agreement lets you take control of what happens in a divorce. A prenuptial agreement protects your assets that you had before marriage. Everything you earn while married is still, by law, shared equally. So not believing in one is illogical. Why wouldn't any logical, free-thinking person want to protect everything they have made up until the point of marriage? Unfortunately, because some people function more on emotions and less on logic, trying to have this logical argument can trigger emotional responses. It is a lose-lose conversation unless you can find a partner who understands the concept and can set aside emotions to make a logical decision. Story 34. If someone is not willing to sign a prenuptial agreement, that is reason enough to walk away. If it becomes about trust, then I will not just walk away, I will run. Story 35. It's not controversial. What the heck? It's just common sense. Every man knows that a woman loves you now, but in the future, no one knows. Story 36. With the majority of divorces being filed by women, it is a logical choice. Men are not the ones leaving marriages, so we need some kind of protection. Story 37. Married over 20 years with no prenuptial agreement, but we had nothing when we got married. Everything earned since then is shared, which I think is fair. I know I am in the minority now and believe prenuptial agreements make sense for most couples. Story 38. They are very important to have. They save time, money, and arguments if the relationship ends. Yes, it is absolutely a trust issue for both sides, especially when laws incentivize women to divorce. Why would she be resistant if she trusts you like she wants you to trust her? Prenuptial agreements are pretty much a must these days because if you do not have your own, you automatically opt into the state's default agreement, which is not a good deal for men or the higher earning party. There are things that should be agreed upon before entering the marriage regardless of how much money either of you has. A couple of big ones are no alimony and each side paying their own attorney fees. Prenuptial agreements also have to be done right. You do not want to go through all the trouble of getting one just to have a judge throw it out for something avoidable. Have it drawn up by a lawyer. Get her a lawyer of her own to advocate for her. It has to be fair. If she gets nothing, it could be thrown out. Full disclosure of assets, properties, debt, and inheritances is required. Get it signed early, at least 6 months before the wedding, ideally before planning the wedding. Story 39. So the whole 50-50 thing after divorce is mostly untrue. It means 50% of marital assets, which is fair. However, I also advocate for a prenuptial agreement and have told my boyfriend that it is non-negotiable should we ever get married. He is going to inherit a lot of money, and I should not have any claim to that. I have children whose inheritance I need to protect. A good prenuptial agreement protects both parties, not just one, and it is better to make all these decisions now when you still like each other rather than later when you dislike each other. It is the ultimate expression of love, in my opinion. Story 40. The tax authorities and debt collectors do not consider how much you trust your partner. Lockdown destroyed my business. I lost everything, and I am still struggling to get it all settled. However, they had no standing to pursue my partner's assets. The attorney explained in detail how difficult our situation would have been if we were married in community of property. A prenuptial contract can be the difference between homelessness or not if things go wrong. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Story 41. You already enter marriage with a prenuptial agreement, whether you want one or not. It is governed by statutory rules enforced by the government or by your own agreement. Story 42. We are strangers if we ever end up divorcing. You are no longer my wife. You are simply my child's mother. But she was your wife for some years, right? What is marriage? Marriage is a union. Two people working together for the common good and a shared goal. That goal is the prosperity of the family, in essence. Both parties put effort into that. Their effort might be different, and the fruit of their labor might not always be monetary. There is a place for a prenuptial agreement if the financial status differs greatly between parties. We are talking about assets, passive investments, owning whole companies, brands, and trademarks. But for everyday people, we are married, we work together. We divorce, we split what we worked for together during that marriage. Story 43. If I had the kind of money that would make me consider a prenuptial agreement in the first place, I would want a prenuptial agreement. Story 44. Depending on where you live and what you own, prenuptial agreements might only have limited use. If you have a trust fund with a few $1,000,000 before marriage, then it makes sense. On the other hand, if you are the sole earner and stay married for a while, your state might consider it reasonable that you should give half your future salary to your ex-spouse indefinitely. Writing a prenuptial agreement that will not be overruled by a judge is difficult. The safest option for men is not to get married, unfortunately, and even then, common law marriage exists. Story 45. It depends on what your current assets are. My wife and I had nothing when we got married, so a prenuptial agreement never crossed our minds. Story 46. I will not get married without a prenuptial agreement. Point blank. I am fortunate enough to have enough assets that I would need one. Regardless, no one should get married without a prenuptial agreement. Story 47. Women do not like prenuptial agreements. You can guess why, but it should be obvious. You may be called untrusting and other names. This is a common tactic of shaming, such as asking, "What type of man are you?" and similar remarks. That being said, prenuptial agreements can be almost useless. Like anything, there are loopholes and ways to circumvent them. About 5 or 6 years ago, I saw a case where the woman claimed she did not know what she was signing and that she was coerced into signing it. The prenuptial agreement was voided, and she received half of everything. Story 48. Waste of time. I have seen instances where the courts basically ignored it, and the man still got treated unfairly. The moral of the story is that the only way to stay safe is to stay away from women. It is unfortunate, but that is the world we live in now. Story 49. I am not a man, so I will probably get removed, but I think they are great. I think of it as making decisions for your future with someone you care about when you do not hate them. You can discuss all the details, so if things do fall apart, you can both move forward without extra animosity. Story 50. From what I have seen and experienced, Many people do not understand how significant a business contract marriage is. A legal marriage is essentially a business contract that most people enter into without fully understanding what it entails or how it can affect their future. Always get a prenuptial agreement or have a marriage that does not include a business contract. The system may try to take advantage of you for not following their rules, but such is life. Story 51. A little context for those unfamiliar. Divorce settlement is the #1 cause of women becoming millionaires in the United States. The second is inheritance from their father or family. Divorce is also the leading cause of homeownership among women, with inheritance again being the second. For men, the #1 cause of bankruptcy or losing owned homes is divorce. The second cause of homelessness among men is divorce, with the first being drug addiction or gambling. Story 52. What is the disparity in income and net worth before marriage? If you are roughly equivalent going into the marriage, then a prenuptial agreement generally is mostly a trust issue. If one of you is considerably more wealthy than the other, then it makes more sense. What most people fail to do is thoroughly document their assets, investments, and liabilities prior to getting married. Both people need to do this, especially the more wealthy partner. If you already own a house, get it professionally appraised before the marriage. Own a lot of firearms, cars, gold, or other valuables. Document them with photos and get them notarized. If you do end up splitting later, the assets you had going in are still yours, although any appreciation or depreciation is fair game. I suggest you talk to a good lawyer and fiduciary to find out what steps you need to take to protect your assets before you get married, if you have a lot of assets. If you are 21 years old with nothing but your car and your clothes to your name, this entire conversation is a waste of time and energy. You have nothing to protect yet. Story 53. Check your country's divorce rate. Not saying the worst will happen, but it is better to be safe than sorry. People always change if love goes out the window. It has less to do with trust and more to do with protecting both of you. I would strongly recommend a prenuptial agreement in this day and age. Again, it is better to be safe than sorry. Story 54. If you have enough assets or money that makes it worth doing, then absolutely do it. It is just logical and does not affect anything if you stay together forever. People saying you are less likely to try and work on issues together seems strange to me. Do you want the threat of losing lots of money to be the reason you work things out? Or do you want to work things out because you care about the person? It should not affect your relationship or behavior. I also buy travel insurance when I go on holiday, but it does not make me more likely to do anything dangerous or something I would not normally do. Story 55. If it is something you have considered, have both of you sit down with a lawyer. They will often provide this type of consulting for free and explain the pros and cons. I would say around 80% of what people think about prenuptial agreements are misconceptions. Story 56. I think it is very situational and cultural as a general rule. If you live in the United States, given the high rates of divorce, and there is a significant difference in income and assets for either gender, it would be wise to consider a prenuptial agreement. If you believe one person will take on childcare responsibilities, you can personalize the prenuptial agreement to acknowledge this. If a partner says your loss of income will not be covered if you stay at home, or something equivalent, do not sign the prenuptial agreement and do not marry them. You can, of course, let the courts arbitrate, but a prenuptial agreement may make this process significantly less costly legally. Story 57. My thoughts are that it's an insurance policy because you don't know how the other person will be when things get bad. Let's say your partner has $20,000 in savings and you accidentally ram your car through the front of a barbershop. There are no serious injuries, but now lawyers are coming after you for assets. Without a prenuptial agreement, that marriage certificate puts your spouse's rainy day fund at risk. Story 58. My girlfriend was the one who proposed getting a prenuptial agreement before we got married. However, she does not believe in divorcing. I think she meant that she would rather work things out, with divorce being the very last option. Story 59. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Not many plan for divorces, but some do, and it is unwise to be unprepared. Story 60. I have fewer assets, so maybe I am biased, but I do not like the idea. It is like entering marriage with a backup plan in case it goes wrong. I feel it could make it easier to give up and not work on the marriage if you have an easy way out. Story 61. It honestly depends on your assets to begin with. 20-somethings with nothing but the basics, there is no point. But if you are both established and have personal assets, then it is not the worst idea, although the importance is overstated by many. Story 62. Do they work? It seems like outside Hollywood, they would be kind of pointless. Wouldn't you marry someone who is equal? You are kind of starting with not trusting you, sign this. Story 63. I have one sitting around somewhere. It ended up being a big waste of time. Prenuptial agreements are good if you are already in an excellent economic position, but if your situation improves further, she is still going to benefit. Story 64. If you do not have significant assets, such as a business or a substantial portion of a property, prior to marriage, it is not worth it. Story 65. I am pro-prenup, but I personally would not get one. That is because I am romantic and feel that wanting one suggests a lack of trust. I do not have significant wealth to worry about. I also plan not to have children. I am willing to accept the cost if I ever have to divorce. I prefer dating people who have the same conflict resolution skills as me so that if we break up, it would be amicable. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.